Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Warp News Show. Today, we're going to talk about energy and the major disruption that is coming to the energy sector. And that sector is, of course, immensely important for humanity. It's helped us raise human living standards. It created wealth for billions of people, but it also created wealth for some major corporations. Actually, out of the 10 largest companies in the world, 7 of them are in the energy sector. So you can see the list here. You have Walmart in number 1, that's retail. But then you have oil and gas, oil and gas, oil and gas, electricity, oil and gas, oil and gas, and oil and gas, and then 2 automotive companies. So some huge companies, but not just companies, also entire nations. So we have 18 so-called petro-states. They're called that because they're so dependent on oil and gas exports, so they're called petro-states. And so this is hugely important, the big sector. We have seen wars being fought over these natural resources. And even though their energy production from fossil fuels are shrinking, it still makes up over 80% globally. But, like I said, this is changing and it's going to be dramatic. And that change is because of 4 Ds, a perfect storm of 4 Ds, 4 Ds of disruptions. And today we'll go through them in detail. I'll just breeze through them quickly here at the beginning. So first you have decarbonization. We're moving away from carbon and fossil fuels in the world. Then you have decentralization. So instead of a few major power plants, we're going to have thousands of mini power plants, like putting solar cells on your roof, for example. And then the third D is digitalization in all aspects of the energy sector. But for example, also in your home, you can connect your home and all your appliances in your home and finally take control of your own energy consumption. And these 3 Ds leads to the 4th, democratization. So instead of the power and the wealth ending up in a few companies and a few nations, it's going to be spread to millions of people instead. So it's going to be democratized. And these 4 Ds leads to a 5th, dinosaurs. So this is going to end the dinosaur era. By that I mean both the dinosaurs we dig out of the ground and burn as fossil fuels, but also the big energy companies, these old dinosaurs, they're really threatened right now. And of course, with a major disruption like this, and when the dinosaur era is ending, you'll see challengers out there. And one of those challengers is the company we're going to talk about today with their CEO. It's called Tibber. It's a Norwegian-Swedish energy company, and we're going to talk with their CEO and co-founder, Edgeir Aksnes, very soon. But before we do that, I want to tell you that this is our first paid partnerships at the Warp News Show. And that came about because this winter I actually became a customer of Tibber. We bought an electric vehicle last year, and I wanted to find some app to charge the car at the optimal time when the prices were lowest. So I thought, okay, there must be an app for that. And it was. I found an app for that, and that app actually was an entire company. So I signed up for Tibber then. And I, of course, read about the company before I signed up, and I realized, okay, these guys seem to share a lot of the values we have at Warp News and Warp Institute. We see the future in the same light, and we want the same kind of future. So when we decided to launch the Warp News Show, I reached out to them and I said, hey, do you want to come on the Warp News Show, and do you want to be a partner with us in this episode? And happily enough, they said yes, because I think they also realized that we share a lot of values and the same view of the future. And we are really picky about who we work with because we're a mission-driven organization. So if ExxonMobil showed up and said, hey, here's $1 billion that we drilled out of the Arctic, do you want it? We will have to say no, absolutely not. But we're very happy to partner with Tibber for this episode. And before we dive into the discussion today, I just want to very briefly tell you about Work News. So Work News is part of the Work Institute. We want to make the future come sooner. We want to make people more optimistic about the future. So you can see the opportunities that are out there and grab those opportunities if you want. Like in the energy sector, with huge disruption comes huge opportunity. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And so with that, I would like to welcome the CEO and co-founder of Tibber, Edgeir Aksnes. Welcome to the Work News Show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Thanks. So I want to start off right away and see how smart you are, because you have started an energy company that sells electricity without profit. Either you're really smart or really dumb. Can you tell us about Tibber and your, why do you sell energy like this?
Sure. I think that if we look upon the whole market of energy and the suppliers actually selling energy to consumers, at the time when we started Tibber, we saw that everybody was doing it, it's the same way. It was very low net promoter score, very low trust in the industry. The industry being very famous for charging inflated rates. So basically, you're paying a lot, and they all have the same business model. So it means that the more that you as a consumer is spending on energy, the more these guys profit, and that's very bad for my own pocketbook as a consumer. It's also bad for the planet. So it's a lot of misaligned stuff there. And across the whole value chain, we saw that everybody was copying each other, doing the same thing, having basically the same business model everywhere, not just in Norway, Sweden, Germany, the markets where we operate today, but everywhere. And we figured that is not smart. There must be a much smarter way so that we can provide a great experience, provide a great tool about energy, but without us needing to have the same bad business model as they have. So we created more like this membership model so that we know that we have the right incentive. So we have the same incentive as a supplier that you as a consumer is having. So we're charging just a fixed rate per month. And then we have the incentive for make you spend less, take charge yourself, and actually reduce, because we're not making a penny out of each kilowatt hour being sold, as opposed to the rest of the industry.
Exactly. That's one of the things that I liked about it when I found you this winter, because you've seen a lot of energy companies. They say, we want you to use less energy, but if we actually would use much less energy, they would lose a lot of money. So it's hard to believe them that they actually want this. But it seems like
it's a way to market it, right? It's a way to market it. But if they really meant it, they would provide you with the tools and the technology and everything related to it. But they're not. So it's quite easy to unveil that they're not serious about it.
Right. I've seen in the news that it seems like you're growing fast. You've been in Norway and Sweden. You expanded to Germany, but you're also adding a lot of customers. Tell us a little bit about how things are going for you.
Yeah, I think we started the company in 2016, and we started scaling. I think we spent a year building the platform. We spent a year trying to find the right product market fit. So we were fighting this battle that every company does in the early age about finding the relevance, finding the reason why to really exist and to provide a value to customers. And so we spent the first couple of years in doing that. But then we started scaling first in Norway, and then we started scaling in Sweden in 2019 for real. We open up Germany now, and now we seem to just there is so much opportunities out there. So really the biggest challenge right now is to prioritize everything in the right order. Say yes and no to the right stuff. So we're reeling in what we call a viral loop, where I think one of the proudest things we have achieved is that we have achieved that the product itself, the app and the experience around it, it's not just liked, it's almost loved by a lot of customers, and this is the way it spreads, because we have no sales guys, we have no telemarketing, we have none of that classical stuff where you have these very intrusive ways of selling a message. We are simply spreading as a result that customers actually like what we do.
Before we dive into the 4Ds there and the perfect storm that is going on, the major disruption here in the energy sector, I want to know a little bit more about you. I listened to a Norwegian podcast with you, and they introduced you. One of the guys on the podcast, they had seen Steve Jobs, his presentation, and you recently did a presentation when you did the one more thing, or I think it was two more things at the end. So they said, this is Norway's Steve Jobs, and maybe not just because of that. Maybe you also want to put a dent in the universe. But except that, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up being co-founder and CEO of Tibber?
Well, first of all, I did not copy Steve, and I would never do that. And I don't think anybody could be him. That's only that guy. However, I think that both me and Daniel, who co-founded the company, I think we're all taking a lot of learnings, a lot of inspirations from many great companies around there, including Apple, but also including many others. And the philosophy that we had was that if we're going to start a company, let's do it and let's put our pride into it. So it's not just to make a product and then just try to hard sell it as much as we can, but let's really try to make an experience which is fundamentally different from what is existing out there, and you can't do that by just changing one simple thing. You need to look upon the whole holistic consumer experience from a different angle. So when we started building the product and the company, we're trying to basically make a product that we loved ourselves, that we really, really wanted ourselves. And then we had also a little bit of the same philosophy when building a company. How can we build a company that we really thrive in, where we can make everybody feel that they're part of something bigger, something more than just selling stuff and making stuff as a result of a request somewhere. So we were really trying to push the thing about the product vision that we're going to achieve, and to really put pride and passion and love into that. So it's so that we can say that, okay, we did this, we're proud of this, and we would never regret it.
Well, so from what I've understood, the idea or the decision to found Tibber came over beers in Helsinki, like all good ideas.
Yeah, it's I think I'd known Daniel for a while. We had worked together for 1 year, but we had known each for a little bit longer. And we were discussing ideas back and forth. We were seeing the same thing in the industry, and we were during that time we used to work in a software company, and the product and the software we were making was delivered to 11 different markets, to hundreds of energy companies. And we were constantly in this struggle that we had a lot of great stuff that we wanted to introduce to the market, but then we needed to sell it first to the energy company so that they could utilize it and then bring it forth to consumers. And just that sales cycle towards the energy company, that took typically a year or two, and the decision-making process was really slow. And interestingly enough, I was selling really customer platforms to these companies. And funnily enough, I think I met 200 executives during a period of a year or two. And during that period, I only heard the word customer mentioned by executives in the industry 5 times out of 200 meetings. And I think that says a lot about where's the focus. So I think there was a lot of stuff going on in there, and this led to us that we figured out that there must be a different way of doing this, and maybe the only way to do it is that we need to start with, totally blank sheets and basically start from scratch and try to make something ourselves.
Okay, cool. So let's go into because you're basing this on sort of the foundation you're basing this on is that the energy sector is changing, the 4Ds that I mentioned before. I thought we'll go through them one by one here. If we start with the first D, then decarbonization, that the world is moving away from carbon. Tell us about that and what that means for the energy sector.
Yeah, I think it's actually two components into that. So one is moving away from carbon-based energy production or power production, and I think that is for us it feels like a given thing. It should be the natural thing. So we try to build a platform around renewable energy, but we have a saying internally here saying that the greenest power is the one that you do not consume, and I think there is a lot of stuff connected to that because there's so much electricity and power being consumed, which basically goes to nothing. It has no value because you're overheating the home, you're spending it at different hours than what you should, and it's waste. So I think this has two components: is that the absolutely greenest energy is the one that you do not consume, and then the second after that is about how to get it from green sources. And there's a challenge to the green sources, and this is a little bit about how this system will work over time, because the challenge is that generating electricity from windmills or from solar panels or from a few of the other sources, it's so that it is very unpredictable. You cannot turn on and off the sun. It doesn't shine at 11 in the evening. There's so much you can do about that. So in there lies a lot of potential to utilize all of this technology coming up, tying this together through digital means in order to utilize it. So we don't believe there is a silver bullet to this, but we believe that parts of this is a new technology now arising, and also how it is connected through digital platforms. And by that, you can achieve this.
Right. So decarbonization is one thing. Then we have decentralization. So not just these major power plants, but thousands or millions of smaller power plants, like solar cells on your roof or in your garden, or connected to some sort of, or you join with your neighbors and put up solar cells or a wind power or something like that. Do you think that is the future that we're going to see? Is that where most of the energy production will come from, those mini power plants instead of those huge ones?
That's definitely one key ingredient here. I think talking about decentralization, you're talking about the generation side of things now, but you can also see that there is a world where battery technology has developed in such a way that you do not necessarily transport energy in the same way anymore. We were playing with the idea about what if you bought electricity for your home in the same way that you buy milk at the local grocery stores, and why not? If the technology is developed to such a level that you get the density and the ratio there, right? That is one scenario. So I think that what we can see now is that decentralization might have two impacts: one on the generation side, but also on the transportation side, because today it's a given that you need to have power lines, but that's not necessarily going to be the case going forward. So those are two huge monopolies that are now that we now see some silhouette of how it can look like in the future, and that's not oriented around it all being centralized. But
from the perspective of not being an expert on energy production and on the whole energy system, it seems reasonable to think that it's pretty effective to have energy production in just a few places and then distribute that out. It seems more ineffective, that everyone should produce their own energy.
You could say that you have the same. Well, if you look upon history, the world has a tendency to go in cycles of what's most effective and what makes sense. If you look upon the evolution of computing, then you would go some years back in time, and you would see things like mainframes being the stuff that was being used, and then we had the transition over to PC, so everything being very distributed. And then what happened? Well, we now are back to a future, or what we're looking at right now today is cloud computing, which very much is being centralized. But at the same time, we have also the capabilities decentralized at the same time. And I think we will see a little bit about this history of how the IT industry has been developing. I think we will see the same stuff in energy. So you don't necessarily see that it's going to be one or the other, but the way that it has been put together now, it's going to be different from what it used to be 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, that's a good example, I think, because of course you have in just a phone like this, you have a supercomputer 20 years ago.
Yes.
And I can use that as a supercomputer in itself, but it's also connected to billions of other supercomputers out there with knowledge and everything. And sometimes I use that, and sometimes I use the cloud, and it's seamless. You don't think about it. Now I'm using my local, and exactly. That's a good example, and I tend to agree. I think that's the thing we want to see. But then we have to be much smarter about, especially connecting, from a consumer perspective, because connecting our homes, so we actually know stuff about it. Now I'm more connected than I used to be. Now I know a little bit more, but now I have to change light bulbs and things like that. So I know more about in detail, not just in general. That my my heating is costing this much. I want to know in detail, so I can and run that in detail. And that is also part of your business, right? It's not just this membership and selling. You also have other, I can buy a light bulb from you or from one of your partners, right?
Yeah, but just also to illustrate this whole point is that the classical way of how old energy companies are looking at the industry is that you have terminologies like upstream and downstream. So basically everything is just following one stream. It's one directional. But if you're looking upon modern homes now, where you have you might have a solar panel. If you live in Germany, that's quite likely the case. 1.8 million homes have house solar panels on the rooftops. Now we have introduction of electric cars, so you have batteries being placed there. You have heating systems, so you might have a heat pump that is running the home and the heating in the home, and a few other things. Now imagine that all of these appliances, the car, the heating system, and the solar panels and everything, they're playing together. They're playing together, so they're basically trying to zero out the net intake or net output of your home. That's their job. And then if such a situation occurs that you actually need to import energy into the home or export it, it's done in a smart way. So it's done at the hours that make sense for the rest of the society at the same time. I think that's the scenario we're looking at. But that also means that it's not one directional anymore, because the interchange between homes and the rest of the grid is done in a much more smarter way. And just as you talked about the phone, you don't have to think about it. It's seamless. It's just happening in the background. And I think that's the analogy there of your iPhone talking to your iCloud or to other cloud services. That's a great one, because it's applied anywhere now in the energy industry, and it's just coming more and more.
Before we jump to the next, I want to ask you a little bit about But solar, we think solar is so super exciting because you see the exponential growth and you see the prices dropping so enormously fast. Even the most, like one of my favorites in this area, Rames Nam, who's been called a naive optimist in his predictions about solar prices, and when he reviewed that now just recently, he was the pessimist. He was a pessimist. All the others were even more pessimistic, but he was a pessimist also. The solar prices has dropped even faster, and of course it's in places where there's a lot of sun. It works even better. But here in the Nordics, in Sweden, where I'm in Norway, and you are in Germany, how does solar energy work there? When, especially in winter, when we often don't see the sun for months.
Yeah, that's. I think I cannot see how residential solar in Norway and Sweden is going to replace importing energy from a hydropower plant or anything else around. I don't see that coming based on how it is today. But if you look upon new houses, new homes being built, they have a degree of insulation and smartness when it comes to warming the home, because and just to have the relationships right here and the facts right, I think that the consumption in a typical Nordic home is you have 4 to 5 times as much consumption during the winter months as opposed to the summer months. So that's kind of the ratio, and typically the solar is coming during the summer because the sun might even be gone during the winter. So there is some imbalance there today, but it seems like other means of technology in terms of heating systems and so on is playing a role there. And then you're getting batteries, as in thermal batteries, that are looking very interesting. I haven't personally been testing this out, but this is now solutions that are becoming solutions for mid commercial usage, and I think that when you look upon the business case of putting solar on your rooftop, it is there to some extent for the southern parts of Sweden and Norway today. So it does make sense. So whenever you're building something new, it almost so that it doesn't make sense not to put it on your rooftop. So I'm a huge believer that solar will play a role, but also due to the seasonality of energy usage and also the characteristics around it, we need to have other ways to combine solar with, so that it makes even more sense for us as people living in the Nordics. And those will include batteries. Those will include a couple of other solutions. And I think that within 5 to 7 years, the business case is so clear that most people will evaluate to have it pretty soon, and all new homes being built have it included.
Right, and especially if how they look doesn't look like solar cells. It stands out. If it looks like a normal roof, but it is solar cells, that would help, I guess, a lot.
Indeed.
Okay, let's move to the third, the digitalization. We've talked about that a bit already, but with the home and connected homes and how that seamlessly could work. But there's a lot of aspects to this, smart grids and smart meters and all that. You often put, when we talk about these things, we often put smart in front of it. But tell us a little bit about that. What is a smart grid, and why does it have to be smart?
Yeah, I think that maybe we can jump to just a couple of concrete cases so that it's being crisp. I think that if you own an electric car, you clearly see the benefit of this today, because you can put it to charge. I think you mentioned this in your intro, that you have a car, you want to charge it at the right hours, because when you get home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the energy prices might be double of what it is a little bit later during the evening or the night. So what you have done is to enable something called smart charging, and it delays the charging so that it is being optimized at the exact hours when it should charge. And the nice thing about that is that it sounds super simple. It's a little bit more complex to that, but it has a great value as well, because if you look upon the price curve or on hourly prices during the day, when it is high prices, it also means that there is a strain in the grid. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's very high consumption or very low production. So if you're able to delay your usage of energy to the cheaper priced hours, you're actually also balancing the grid, and that's a great stuff. So you are earning money on that, but you're also helping the grid to balance itself. And then there is there's possibilities of doing this on even smaller levels. So doing something called demand response and evening out the frequency and stuff. But the main principle is the same. It's about you as a consumer getting paid or saving money for that matter. And when you do that and you're utilizing the lower priced hours, you're helping to balance out the whole grid. And why is that important? Well, the case is that if there are spikes of usage in the grid, you need to build new cables and other infrastructure hardware in the grid. That's super expensive. And why create all of that strain unnecessarily in an unnecessary way? I think that's the key thing here. So that the grid is being best optimized when the usage is more or less flat. So actually, the very famous quote about flattening the curve that is now in relation to the COVID situation and so on, you could actually apply that to the grid as well. So it's about flattening the curve there. So getting it as flat as possible, that's the best thing that could happen for the grid.
Right, exactly, and like we said before, or you said before, if we also have batteries, big batteries in our homes, they can take some of that in the evening when you cook food and turn on the TV and all other stuff, and then you can charge some of that during the night when you don't need it for all the other stuff. So that's 3 of the Ds, and these 3 Ds lead to the 4th. The democratization. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's by being a little bit populistic. You can say power to the people. So it means that to move the well, today the power market and the energy markets have been dominated by huge companies. We call them dinosaurs. I fully agree to that term, and it's something about, because of all of this stuff of consumer tech coming, about solar panels that you can put on your rooftop, about you buying an electric heater that is connected to Wi-Fi, or you buy an EV that is connected to Wi-Fi as well, or to the internet as well. That creates thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and soon to be millions of assets that you can switch on and off. And if all of these appliances are working together, their strength is much bigger than what you find in the power stations and in the huge energy companies. And that, I think, is a huge thing. So as soon as people we as consumers are getting just the right tool in our hand, we can leverage that power. And I think it's a big thing. It's about getting. It's about, I think most people wants to be responsible, wants to do good, wants to make the smart choices. So once you have put the tool in their hands, we tend to choose that as long as it is convenient, easy, and so on. And I think that is what can create a spark in democratization of energy, so that we are all both contributing but also reaping the benefits out of all of this new tech coming, and that's basically distributing the way that the power market is being how it works today.
Yeah. And I think for me and for work, this is the most important aspect of this, because on the one hand, energy, oil and gas, this sector has produced, like I said in the beginning, is made possible enormous wealth for millions of people and raising human living standards. So a lot of good has come out of coal and oil and gas. But as we know, it's created a lot of problems. Climate change, one, but also the geopolitics of it. There's petrostates. There's no democracies there. There's some kings and rulers and dictators propped up by billions of oil money and having enormous power over the world. So I think it's good in many aspects if this power and some of the wealth is spread among millions or billions of people. Instead, it's ending up like especially in those dictatorships. Where they use the money to oppress their own people. So I think this is a very important, the most important aspect of this. But these 4 Ds, what is, we've been talking about that, of course, but what is Tibber's role in all of this? What are you trying to achieve here?
I think we've touched upon several of those, but one key element that we haven't talked about is what does Tibber actually mean? It's coming from a Latin word tibis, which means for you. So it says a lot about what we're trying to achieve is to create the best. We are trying to put this tool in your hand so that you can take charge yourself, so that you can shop energy from a green source, but it shouldn't cost you more than if you're buying, let's say, gray energy or whatever kind of energy. It should be equal to the price. So what we're trying to achieve is to give you all of these tools so that you're able to get the uncompromised service or product in your hand. Because that is something we see as a problem, that you quite often as a consumer, you need to choose, am I going to select the green and good stuff here, but I need to pay something more, or am I picking the one which is applying better to my wallet and it's basically the best deal? We think that all of these choices that we as consumers need to do, it's hopeless. Why do we need to make those choices? So we believe that we need to make it simple for the consumer to put the green and good stuff together with what's the best deal in so many of these dimensions, and basically build the best tool so that you are equipped to basically seize power yourself.
So how big of an impact are you? What's the vision for Tibber in itself? How big of an impact do you want to have on the world? You're, like we said, you're in Norway, Sweden, Germany now, and from what I gather, you're looking to expand to other countries. But do you want to? We often, when we talk about startups, we talk about unicorns, $1 billion valuation. But there's a new thing out there, impact unicorn, having a positive impact on 1 billion people. What are your aims and vision for Tibber?
Well, we are also quite pragmatic. So we're working 0 by 0. So we start with 1,000 customers, and then we got to 10,000 customers, and we're working towards 100, 1 million, 10 million. So we're in that journey, and 10 doubling this every 18 months or so. And we think there is originally we saw the potential to make homes being self-served so that you become independent. Basically, that's also what you need to do in markets where you don't have good infrastructure and so on. So we see a lot of great projects now going on in for instance, Africa, Asia, and so on, where you get solar panels so that you can get access to light and other appliances during the evening. And talking about democratization, I think that's a great example of it. But we also believe that's going to happen on a greater scale, also in the industrialized areas. So making everybody contribute. And the target we have set is that the residential side of the world should be moving entirely away from being connected to fossil ways of energy usage. We are going to accelerate that transition, and at the same time reduce the energy consumption by 20% on average for each individual household. So that's like and 20% sounds like little, but I believe that that's the right number to achieve, because that will even out so many things across the world. So those are the key elements that we're struggling to find, and also to do this in a way that, as I mentioned earlier, you're not compromising on what's a good deal, what's a great experience, and so on. You really put all your pride, effort, and passion into creating that the right triangle there.
In a disruption like this, that we mentioned several times, the dinosaurs here spoke to fossil fuels, but in this case now, the big energy companies, the old dinosaurs, and in the disruption, we move often to something better. And in this case, I definitely think it's something better. We move away from fossil fuels. But it's, of course, it's not that you want the dinosaurs to die out. It's fine if they live on, if they change and drive this forward. But it seems like they're in for a really tough journey. Many of them, they are invested heavily in fossil fuels in different ways, and drilling oil and finding oil is hugely expensive, and you have to have a real long-term view of that. But so what do you think is going to happen to those dinosaurs? Are they gonna live?
I think if you look upon fossil sources and so on, that you're right, it's going to live on for decades to come still. But what I think will die first is the legacy business models, where you are, at least on the consumer-facing side, because it's on the consumer-facing side, you will probably see some of the changes first. And then the longer you move backwards in the classical sense of the value chain, the harder it is to change, because the infrastructure and the investments are so large. But I think what's very fast moving is the consumer facing side. And once you have the consumer facing side there, you also tend to get more power to change the rest of the stuff. And then things might happen much faster. But I truly believe that, as you say, I don't hope that any of these companies die, but I really hope a lot of the business model, profit models, and their philosophies will die as soon as possible, because they're not good for me as a customer. They're not good for the planet. They should die. They deserve to die, those models. And then what that means is that it will change. Whether that's the same companies or new ones, that's not entirely irrelevant, since I'm in the market. But from an objective point of view, it's irrelevant. But it's really the models that need to change. And the sooner, the more companies and pioneers participating, the better.
So in the work community, there's a lot of people that they're part of this community because they, as we want to make the future come sooner. These kind of things happen sooner rather than later, and we always say, and we talk about that a lot in our community. Things don't automatically happen. It's easy when you look at trends and things like that. It's like, yeah, it's automatic. It's just going to happen, but it happens because someone actually does it. So what is your advice to people watching this and want this future we've been talking about? They want to make sure that this happens as soon as possible. What can they do? And by that I mean it could be the small things in their private lives as consumers, but it could also be the things like you have done, started a company. What other companies do we need to see here, and or projects or influence the politicians, for example. What can people do? Small things and big things.
I think on an individual level, I'm always encouraging that you should put your actions in where you have the most passion, as a general rule. That's always important, because then you can do something that can really be sustainable and enduring over time. And secondly, I think that going back to a topic that we have touched upon a couple of times, about we are in our daily lives, we're accepting so many compromises, and quite often compromises can be good in a lot of senses, but I believe that when it comes to what is green and sustainable and what's comfortable or making sense to the financial side of things, I don't think we should accept compromises in those areas. I think there are so many great solutions out there that can remove those compromises, so that we can really find not just an okay way of do something which is sustainable. For instance, if you need to, well, I'll just bring one example from our world, or where we are working today. So if you were to each and every day check on your mobile telephone when is the energy price high, and when is there a high strain on the grid, and then to plot in on your car when it should charge, each and every day you should do that. That wouldn't be a good solution. So you need to have, there is a smarter way to that. And there are so many examples around that. And I think that looking for ways so that you can make enduring difference, and not just easy fixes, which will just be temporarily, and then to remove these hurdles. I think that, but this is going to be quite individual from person to person of whom you ask.
Another, if we leave the energy sector, it could, or your answer could be regarding the energy sector. But we realized in work, when you talk about the future, there's very few visions of the future that are actually positive and optimistic. Much of that comes from Hollywood and books and that kind of science fiction. It's often in a dark future, and that of course makes for good drama. But it's not the future you want to envision. And I think it's very important to think about what do we actually want to do with humanity and with our world and with our planet, and in a positive way. So we've started to ask smart people about that. So Edgar, what is your vision for the world and for humanity?
It's a lot of, well, it's a lot of different perspectives we could take on this. I think that let's select the one that has to do with energy, and energy has a lot to do with resources. And looking at the world of men, we see that the battle of resources have been there all the time. We are spending more, we are consuming more, and thus we need more resources, and then we fight over the resources, and that has led to both wars and desperations in so many places. And I think that is one of the fundamental things I hope will change into something else, that we are getting this, I would say, much more independence of increased consumption and the independence from certain resources. There will always be connections there, but about untying this very Stone Age type of mentality that we have, that we need to have more and more resources and get them along in order to fuel accelerating consumption. I would like to see a world where we are able to stop that and somehow reverse that. Because the fact of the matter is that resources are not endless. And we cannot have status and pride connected to how many resources we are able to consume during a lifetime. It might not be the answer you're looking for, but that's at least my few cents around that.
Absolutely. No, I'm not looking for a particular answer. We want to gather all these different answers from people about what they want with the future and humanity. So thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for joining the Warp News Show and helping sponsor this episode and helping us with our mission to make people more optimistic about the future. So thank you very much for joining us and a very very big good luck in your important mission with Tibber. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so thank you very much for watching the Warp News Show. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can hit subscribe so you'll get a notification when we put up new videos, new Warp shows and other videos. If you're watching this somewhere else, you can of course head to YouTube. You find the URL down here. And also, we have a newsletter, a free newsletter, so you get a dose of fact-based optimistic news once a week in your inbox. So that's always nice to have somewhere. There's a lot of dark headlines, but here's a dose of fact-based optimistic news. So head to our website, warpinstitute.org, or Etsy if you're from Sweden, and sign up for that newsletter. So thank you very much for watching the Warp News Show, and have a nice week, and may the future come sooner.